Have you ever wondered why some Airbnb properties are almost fully booked, and then others struggle to find people who want to stay in them? Sometimes it's as simple as location, which is super important in the real estate world, and it's important with short-term rentals as well. Today, we're going to be talking all about why location matters when you're investigating or looking to buy a short-term rental property. My name is Jason Muth. I am a 30-time Airbnb super host. We've been hosting since 2016. I worked in the media business for over 25 years. This is now our full-time thing. It's our second chapter in life, and we're super thrilled to teach you how to create a smart stay for your guests. Now, on with the show. All right, so we're talking about location with short-term rentals today. And this sounds so intuitive. It almost sounds stupid, frankly, because everybody knows how important location is in the real estate world. So why should it be any different with short-term rentals? The short answer is it's not any different. In fact, it's almost more critical. And here's why. When it comes down to anything else, like think about this right now. If you are looking to book a property for 2 nights, 3 nights, 5 nights, 7 nights, whatever, okay, the amount of time that you're going to spend at that property could be the entire time you're there, but it's often going to be the launching pad for the activities that you're looking to do in the area. Now, there are some short-term rentals that are fully baked in with the amenities. It has the pickleball court, it has the hot tub, it has the swimming pool. It's right on the beach. It's got everything you want inside, and that location is probably fantastic and has great amenities. That property is going to knock it out of the park unless you're doing something really wrong. But if you have all those amenities at your property, but your location is terrible, well, clearly it's going to hurt. And here's why. People are looking for convenience to national parks, to restaurants, to facilities, to basically things to do that are outside the confines of your property. And when they're looking for a property to book, they're often going to evaluate the distance to whatever they're coming to the area for that your property is to that place. Now, it's tough. If you already own a property and you are short-term renting it out, you can't really pick it up and put it in a better location, okay? This all starts with how you're purchasing property. Now, you might have come into a short-term rental because you purchased it consciously. You picked that property, you put your money down, and that's the one that you got. You might have a property that you inherited from your family, and you really didn't have any say into, where that property was. It got passed down through generations, and now it's yours, and you're looking to make the best of what you have right there. If you're looking for your first short-term rental property, location is something that you actually can control because you could dig into where the properties are and decide if a property that hits the market that you're able to buy is in the right spot for a short-term rental. Let me focus in a bit on why location is so critical for your short-term rental properties, okay? Let's just take a typical summer vacation at the beach or at the lake, okay? Here in New England, there's some people that like going north and going to Sebago Lake, going to Winnipesaukee, going to many of the lakes throughout northern New England. There's some people that like going to the beach. They'll go to Cape Ann. They'll go to the beaches on Plum Island. They'll go to the New Hampshire seacoast. They'll go to Cape Cod. And in both situations, the location of your property to the reason why people are going there is going to be more important, okay? At the most basic level, lakes. If you're on the lake, you're probably going to be able to charge more per night than if you're not on the lake, okay? That sounds really intuitive. But does that mean that the lake property is a better investment? We'll get to that in a little bit because it might not necessarily be a better investment. Same thing at the beach. Okay. If your property is right there on the beach, it's probably going to be rented more frequently at a higher rate versus being a drive away from the beach. Now, some beaches, many beaches, in fact, all up and down the Eastern Seaboard, parking is really difficult when you go to the beach. Okay. A lot of times the towns will restrict it to just people that own property in the town, or often the lots will fill up with visitors and you'll have to get there super early in the day. And if you're in one of those types of towns, you have to realize that if your property is going to require your guests to drive to the beach, that might inhibit the rate that you could charge and the frequency that you book it, because the properties that are going to be walking to the beach or on the beach are going to get booked up first. Similar concept to the lake. I know that there are some lakes in New Hampshire where we have properties where the town only allows people that are taxpayers in the town to utilize that facility. So short-term rental guests can't use many association beaches. They can't use beaches for the town. They'll have to go to state parks and other ones that'll welcome them. So it's important to have good proximity so your guests could actually get to where they want to go. Now you could have the best property in the world, and that's fantastic. But if you're going to be in the middle of nowhere, it's probably not going to do as well as a marginal property that has the most fantastic location. What that does not mean is that you can't let these properties really just, lose all their value and have you pay no attention to the cleanliness, being to update the properties if you happen to be in a great location. We've seen lots of people that have beach houses that are just so run down, and they'll get rented during the summer season because everything rents up. They won't get the top dollar that they could have gotten if they actually put on a new coat of paint and improve the air conditioners and improve the furniture. But that's a whole separate conversation. We're just talking about the location right here. Now think about when you go on vacation with your family. All right. There's going to be things that are within driving distance, things that are within walking distance. You don't necessarily have to be something right there in the middle of it all in some of these markets, because sometimes that could be a little detrimental, especially if it's a really loud area. It might seem like having that property right in the thick of everything is the most desirable, but you'll want to visit the area and decide, listen, are people loud here into all hours of the evening? And if that's the case, you might want to just go a couple blocks away from there where you're walkable or drivable into the center of that destination, but you don't get the noise that you're getting from the crowds of people that might be there late into the evening. One of our markets is Provincetown, Massachusetts. And before we decided to buy our property there, which we bought in a part of town called the West End, which is quiet, it's more residential, there's not as many commercial ventures down our way. There's beautiful gardens, and some people actually live there full time, or they have second homes that they don't rent out, but it's within walking distance, like literally a 10-minute walk to some of the hottest clubs and things to do in Provincetown. I remember we were considering a property that was right in the middle of Commercial Street, which is the main drag in P-Town. And we have a Commercial Street address. Lots of people have Commercial Street addresses, but this was in the thick of the middle of town. Literally, you get off the ferry and then you bang a left, and you're kind of right there at that property. And at first, it seemed like the perfect place to buy, but I'm really grateful that we decided not to purchase that one, because then we would have had to have worried about noise on the street well past midnight, 1 a.m., 1:30, 2 o'clock in some situations. Parking was much more of a struggle in that part of town. And, it just didn't seem like it would have been the best short-term rental for the variety of types of people that go to Provincetown, as opposed to the property that we ended up purchasing, which is walkable to the ferry. But it's also, we have a parking spot. So when you drive in, you could park right in front of our place and go to the unit and then escape from all of the craziness downtown. I know that's the case with Hampton Beach as well, which is in New Hampshire. There are a lot of beach rentals that are up and down the main drag. But if you just go a couple streets away from that, you might be able to have properties that are a little bit more desirable for your guests, because they're not going to be directly in the thick of the craziness, but they're just a couple blocks away from that. Now, earlier I mentioned, a lakefront property that is probably going to perform a lot better than one that might not be directly on the lake. But let me give you an idea for what you could think about as you're evaluating communities. Sometimes if you can get into the community and you can use the amenities in the community for your renters, you might not necessarily want to be that one directly on the lake. And here's why. The taxes might be higher in many situations. The property cost might be a lot more because you are lakefront. Now, granted, you're lakefront. You have these beautiful views. You might have a little sandy beach. You might have direct access to a boat or a dock. But not all guests necessarily want those things. There are plenty of guests that are traveling to summer destinations that aren't going to have a boat in tow. They don't necessarily want to pay for a lakefront property, but they want to have that lake experience. So they'll gladly pay for the property that's across the street from the lake or 2 streets away, as long as the neighbors are, are good neighbors. And that's the next point I want to talk about. This legitimately can be a house by house situation when you're considering the location of your property for your short-term rental. You never know who your neighbors are before you're buying it. And it is always a risk when you purchase a property and start meeting the people around you that you find somebody that is not going to be amenable to short-term rentals. And you could have the best location in the world, but if you get somebody that's going to make your life miserable, you're going to have a really difficult road. So you really want to try to investigate who else lives in that community. Now, if you're going to do a short-term rental in a community where short-term rentals are really not a common thing, you might think that's a good idea, but everyone in the neighborhood might band up against you and suddenly start making your life and your guest life a lot more difficult. So we always recommend, if you're investigating markets, to try to find some markets where there is a culture of short-term renting. There's a culture of people that have been doing this for some duration of time. Maybe there's even a licensure process that you can go through. And regulations are not necessarily a bad thing for this reason, because it means that the town or the city municipality has actually put some thought behind what they want from the people that own property there. And if they're going to require a license that requires certain stipulations, like having trash pickup on a regular basis, enough parking, a large enough septic tank, if indeed you're on septic, then it means that this has come up before in that community. I think back to where I'm from, like just outside New York City, and granted, there are short-term rentals everywhere these days, but I can't even imagine the subdivision and the suburb that I grew up in, if any of those properties were short-term rental properties. It just seems so out of place for that specific neighborhood. So as houses transact, it would just be a little weird having one that turns into a short-term rental in that market, and the neighbors might not, think too kindly of that. Now, with that said, in many situations, it's your property. Like, you can't do whatever you want with the property, but like, it's your property. You should have the ability to utilize it, to the extent of the rules in where you bought. So, consider the immediate surroundings when you're looking for a property. If you're digging into a market, maybe you're using AirDNA to really dig into a market, or maybe you're just working with a short-term rental friendly real estate agent. I think it's important to ask these questions and say, okay, is this a good town? Is this a good location near the other amenities that people are going to want to come to the area for? On this street, is it on the right side of the street? Am I abutting a highway? Am I right outside a really busy road? What are the neighbors like that are near you? These are all considerations for location. Everyone talks so much about the market that you should buy into, right? This has been a common conversation topic with podcasters for so long. Like, what are the hottest markets? Okay, pick a market that's a hot market. Hot Springs, Arkansas. Is that where Hot Springs is? I think it's there. All right, so great. Maybe if that market's hot and people are looking at it, but now you got to do the heavy legwork. You got to investigate the individual properties, the streets where they're on, and where they are in relation to everything else. Because if you're not doing that, you might end up with a location that you're stuck with where suddenly you can't rent it out as a short-term rental. And the last thing that you want to do is buy a property, start moving in all this new furniture that you're purchasing, start getting it ready for short-term rentals. You happen to meet your next door neighbor. You mention what you're going to do to them, what you're going to do for short-term rentals of the property. And suddenly they're putting up, I don't know, they're putting up a lot of barriers. Like, they could be putting signs up on a fence that might intimidate your guests. Like, whether or not it's legal, these things are known as what some property owners are doing if they really want to intimidate and scare people from using short-term rental properties near them. So those are difficult factors to figure out until you're actually talking to your neighbors, and you're actually looking at a specific property. And one of the best strategies that we've had that we recommend is, as you get embedded in a community, see what your neighbors do. And is there any way that they can help your property? Maybe they want to be your cleaner. Maybe they want to be your handyman. Maybe they know an electrician if you're looking for electrical work. Maybe they themselves can do some carpentry if you're looking to build a deck. And sometimes if you start employing people in the area, then they might have a better understanding as to what the property is going to look like and how you are as an operator. Plus, it certainly doesn't hurt that you're giving them business. Okay, so as you're considering different locations, you'll want to think about the type of person who's going to be your traveler. What is the avatar of the person who's going to be actually staying at your property? Now, this could simply be you. It could be if you're you're married, you have some kids, and you travel to family destinations, and that's who you think you're going to attract. Well, then that's easy. Then try to build amenities in that would attract more people like yourself. If you're looking for a pure investment, and you're looking for the right market for that investment, figure out who's going to that market. You might be looking at an urban environment, any city around the country that has a downtown, that has a commercial center to it. And if you want to put some, short-term rentals in those areas, why would people go to that city? Are they there for work? Are they there for pleasure? Are they there to visit museums? Are they there to go party? Is it a Nashville or Scottsdale or Austin type town? Why are people actually going to that town? Think about that first. And then the types of properties you're going to look at and the ways you appoint those properties are probably going to factor into that type of person. Think about if you want to have a nature getaway. Okay. There are a lot of places within 1, 2, 3 hour drive of most major cities here in the country that people from the city are going to want to drive to. Now, if it's New York City, it was always upstate New York. You're going to Bear Mountain, you're going to the Catskills, you're going to the Poconos, to get out of the city. In Boston, people either go up to, the lakes and the mountains of New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine, or they're going to Cape Cod, but it's all drivable, right? Who are the types of people, where do they live, and what do they want in the areas where your property might be? So let's say that you're going to do that beach house on the Cape or that cabin in the woods. You're really going to want to figure out the avatar of the type of person that wants to have that type of escape from the city. They want to get out of the hustle and bustle. They want to get some nature. They want to go hiking. They want to have some solitude. They want to have some quiet. So those are the things you'll want to emphasize with your short-term rental listing. When you're looking for that type of location, realize that people are traveling everywhere. And a lot of times, if you look on Airbnb, sure, there is a geography filter in there, but sometimes people are searching by category and they're searching for the type of property that you have. And in the minds of many, it doesn't matter necessarily where they go. We have properties in New Hampshire, in a town that's not really the type of place that people would go for much tourism. But, one thing we have working for us there is that it is within about an hour and a half or 2 miles from, or 2 hours from Boston. And other major areas like Manchester, New Hampshire is, an hour drive from there. Portland, Maine. If you're coming up from Connecticut and you're looking for an escape in New Hampshire and you see our place, well, you might not care necessarily what town it's in because all you know is you're going to this house. And then you start to dissect, okay, what is within driving distance of this house? And the way that we market those properties is that we're an amazing 30 to 60-minute drive in any direction to fun things that you could do that day. So people could have our property be kind of their base camp. They could enjoy their time there. But then if they want to do a day trip north, hop in the car, drive 45 minutes north, you're at Lake Winnipesaukee. Drive a half hour south, you're in Portland, you're in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. You could drive a half hour west, you're at University of New Hampshire, or you can go check out the state capitol in Concord. You could drive to where we live, Newburyport, in under an hour. You can be in Boston in an hour and a half. And some people that are flying in from California, West Coast, Florida, An hour and a half drive, from a cabin in the woods to a major city like Boston is nothing. So, you'll want to emphasize those location elements to people, but you want to know exactly who your customers are and where they're coming from. And if you happen to have like a really unique destination, like a mountain house, or I don't know, something that is, a yurt or container home, well, then the location, again, it will matter locally, like, and who your neighbors are and what the town rules are and where you are in relation to everything else. But, in those kind of situations, a lot of times people are booking that specific property to book the property. I remember we booked an Airstream once, and we traveled with it. Like, so we booked it from somebody that rented out RVs, and we wanted just an Airstream. So we literally didn't care where we picked it up from, and where we ended up picking up from is where we ended up going for our trip, which was upstate New York. Some people are gonna be like that. If someone wants a container home or somebody wants to stay in, a dome, they'll look for where they are and they'll go to those. So in those kind of location situations, you just want to make sure that your location is going to be one that, works out with local town regulations. So here are some actionable tips that you can improve your location value for your short-term rental. The first one, if your property is not in a prime location, you'll want to promote the lesser known things or the things that are unique about that area. Maybe you have an amazing barbecue place, or maybe you have a really hidden gem of a state park that's nearby. Maybe you have a great hike to the top of a summit that has a beautiful view that you would have never known existed if you weren't necessarily familiar with the area. People know the big attractions, but some of those lesser things are just as important when people are considering where they want to book their property. And if you happen to know the ins and outs of what the locals, would consider the hidden gems, well, emphasize that stuff with your location, and you might be able to overcome not having the most awesome location on an Airbnb map, but then you make up for it by supplying some really fun things to do that people wouldn't have necessarily considered. Okay, a second tip, you could talk about transportation options for guests. You could provide information about the public transportation that is in the area, any shuttle services. You could talk about, is Uber really driving, or Lyft, are they driving in the area? Is it easy to pick one of those up? Because sometimes people might want to go out for the night, and you might want to call an Uber and have them drive you home instead of you drinking and then driving on some really dark, unfamiliar roads when you probably shouldn't be doing that. Another tip is that you could upgrade the experience of your short-term rental itself. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about hot tubs and swimming pools and amenities that you have. Pickleball is one that people were putting in. I couldn't imagine having a pickleball court at my place, but people do have it. And that is not a way to endear yourself to your neighbors, but that's a whole separate topic. But, upgrade the experience at your property. Like, make sure you have like big TVs, comfortable chairs, lots of board games, fun things to do that are actually at the property. A couple surprises, maybe stand-up video games. Maybe you'll have like an air hockey table. Maybe you'll have upgraded amenities. Maybe you have a sauna there, like one of those barrel saunas. If you put a couple of those things on your property, well, then your property itself becomes part of a destination. It might be able to overcome some issues that you might have with your location if you happen to not be in the best one. And then finally, what you could do is you could emphasize the great things about your location with amazing photography and marketing. Now, you don't want to be deceitful or not truthful with anything that you're doing, because people will call you on that in a second. So please make sure that you are creating a great ambiance and setting when you're describing where your property is, but you want to be accurate. You want to say your distance to different things. In Provincetown, since a lot of people walk, we put it two different ways on our listings. One, if the location is really, really good, we'll put how many minutes of a walk you are to specific things. And usually we'll emphasize things that are under a 20-minute walk. If people are walking about walking about 3 miles an hour, that's, 1 mile is about 20 minutes. That's a relatively reasonable walk for a lot of healthy people. And people like to walk around these days. It's really healthy. Everyone's counting their steps. And if the walk is not going to be that far, you're not going to say a 45-minute walk to somewhere, because that seems pretty far. But in that case, you might say a 1.5 miles to X, right? And let them figure out, okay, it's a mile and a half to get there. I could take an Uber. I could ride my bike there. We could take the car. But if you're talking about proximity, we often do it within number of minutes that it takes to walk places in a town like Provincetown. But when you're talking about your property and the location that you have in relation to the amenities that are nearby, you'll want to make sure that you highlight those things with great photos. And the photos that you put up on your listing, let them know if this is a photo that's taken at your listing or if it's a photo that is of a nearby attraction. Because, I've seen properties that make it feel like they're a beachfront property, but you get there and it's not a beachfront property. And it's clearly not a beachfront property if you really, look at the listing, but they have so many beachy photos that you're not quite sure. And going back to like our properties in New Hampshire, ours are across the street from the lake. They are. That's what we decided to buy. But we have access to the lake. So we have pictures of the lake, but we make it very clear that the property is not lakefront. We don't check off the lakefront box. We don't claim that it's lakefront. And even at that, the questions that you'll get from your guests and from people that are inquiring, they're going to ask if the property is lakefront, because guess what? People don't read. They just don't. So, you don't have to be mean to them when they ask you these questions, but you could just remind them and kindly tell them, hey, listen, like, we are not a lakefront property. If you're looking for lakefront, then, this is not going to be the right one for you. But we do have the following things that you might want to consider if you're booking our property, or if you can't find the lakefront one, here's why you might want to book our property. So, location is just something that's super important when you're considering a short-term rental. And I can't stress it enough that if you have the ability to really dig into where you're going to buy, will invest some time to think through the positives and negatives of the properties that you're considering. If you already have your property and it is in a great, desirable location, fantastic. Keep up all the housework of that property and make sure it's in great condition, so you could be one of the top properties that are in that great location. But if you have your property and it's not necessarily in the perfect location, make sure you start emphasizing all the things that are great about your property or great about why you are an alternative to the ones that are in that prime location. So thank you for listening to this episode about location in your short-term rentals and why location will really affect your rental profitability. If you want to learn more about us, there's plenty of other episodes here. If you're watching this on YouTube or you've downloaded the audio, go check out all of our episodes on the Smart Stay Show. If you want to learn more about our coaching program, you can go to smartstaycoaching.com, fill out our form, and we'll talk to you about your own property. So my name is Jason Muth. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.